very first panel is on the culture of sustainability, leading business with purpose, people, planet, philanthropy, and provenance, and how we can explore the values and the power of business transformation, and why is it important for leaders to align profit with the purpose to create conscious companies. I would like to call upon Geetha Murali. She's going to be moderating our session. Yes, Geetha is there. And she's the CEO of Room to Read. Geetha, please. And she's going to be joined by Prat Panda, Social Impact Strategy and Innovation Executive with Accenture. Quintos. She's the former CEO, CCO and CMO of Dell Technologies. And we have Sanjeev Joshipura. He's the Executive Director of Indiaspora. So thank you so much for joining us, and over to you, Geetha.
I am the Inclusive Business Lead at Accenture, which means I advise companies on their CSR, social impact agendas. My second job is I am faculty at NYU, and you see some of my students here. Thanks for coming. And I teach a course on CSR and sustainability, and my most important job is I am a parent of two wonderful small children, 3 and 6, so I'm in it for the parents you know what that feels like. And I do this for them, right? At the end of the day, sustainability and practice.
I'm super optimistic that when you cut through all of the noise that's out there right now on the traditional kind of way people talk about ESG and CSR, there's a lot of progress that's being made. The great companies are staying the course. They're scrubbing their websites, they're taking out all the lightning rod words and all of that so they don't get caught up in some of the...
Thank you, Geetha. I'm delighted to be here with my fellow panelists, and thanks to Win as well, Stuti and team. You know, Adam Smith is supposed to have said that the invisible hand of capitalism will always move in the right direction. He didn't quite say that, but he's purported to have said that. And Milton Friedman said the business of business is business. But in some ways, perhaps they were not entirely correct.
Known them for decades now, and thank you for joining me. I have great friends here, some new friends, some old. I can see some of them all sitting on the left side. But thank you so much. I know there are a lot of people coming up, and we do have the minister joining us shortly, so we will kickstart the first panel because our panelists are here. And so as you all know that we are the third rock from the sun, a planet full of life, wonder and possibility. And I'm really excited that we are here, present here during the Climate Week and UNGA 80. And it is the Sustainability September for us. So I'm not going to take any more time. Our very first panel is on the culture of sustainability, leading business with purpose, people, planet, philanthropy, and provenance. And how we can explore the values and the power of business transformation, and why is it important for leaders to align profit with the purpose to create conscious companies. I would like to call upon Geetha Murali. She's going to be moderating our session. Yes, Geetha is there. And she's the CEO of Room to Read. Geetha, please. And she's going to be joined by Prat Panda, Social Impact Strategy and Innovation Executive with Accenture. Quintos. She's the former CEO, CCO and CMO of Dell Technologies. And we have Sanjeev Joshipura. He's the Executive Director of Indiaspora. So thank you so much for joining us, and over to you, Geetha.
How's that? Okay. Well, it is wonderful to be here with all of you. It's really a privilege to be in New York at this time of year when people are gathering from all over the world to think about some of the greatest challenges of our time, and in its most positive state, working together to co-create solutions that match the scale of the problems that we face. With so many changes in the geopolitical climate, with the climate crises we're facing, with social inequities of various sorts, organizations across public, private, social sector are thinking deeply about their values and how they show up and the power of their own convictions. And in the work that I do, I've been fortunate to see children around the world reading and communities rising out of poverty because of partnerships that are bold enough to pair impact with strategy. So very interested to hear from our panelists about how they think about what the business world is facing and how businesses are facing things like building trust and innovating for the planet and considering the creation of legacies beyond quarterly results. So we have a really esteemed panel with us today to talk through some of these issues and navigate that balance between profit and purpose and some of the considerations associated. So we'll just jump in. I know we don't have a lot of time. So Prat, Karen, Sanjeev, this first question is really looking at that intersection of profit and purpose and how companies think about ROI in relation to philanthropy and supply chains and some of the ethical considerations they might have to make, particularly at this moment. So in any order, your thoughts? Prat, maybe we'll start with you since you're right next to me on this topic.
Thank you, Geetha. And thanks. So first of all, thank you so much to Shruti and the entire WIN team for hosting us at this beautiful venue. Thank you all for joining. There's a lot of activities going on this week, so it's great that you chose me to be here. So I have 3 jobs. My first job, my day job is I am the inclusive business lead at Accenture, which means I advise companies on their CSR social impact agendas. My second job is I am in faculty at NYU, and I see some of my students here. Thanks for coming. And I teach a course on CSR and sustainability. And my most important job is I am a parent of 2 wonderful small children, 3 and 6. So I'm in it for the parents in the room. You know what that feels like. And I do this for them, right? At the end of the day, sustainability and impact is about the future. And to your question, I think the best way the private sector can do good for the world is through business, through their core business. I think if you look at the history of sustainability and CSR, not all the way back in time, let's just go back 20 years. We've kind of been we've gone through 4 eras. It started off 20-ish years ago with, especially with sustainability, more as a compliance. We need to mitigate risk. It's a PR tool. Similarly, at that time, for those of you in pharma space, there was a Chinese firewall between CSR and the business because of, we won't need to get into the details of it, but business did not interact with social responsibility. It was something that we did for charity and it didn't benefit the business. Then we go into the next era where we start seeing regulations come in and businesses starting to realize that CSR and sustainability in particular, as well as CSR, could be strategic imperatives for business. And you start seeing more companies like Unilever, for instance, creating their sustainable living plan, which is quite impressive when you think about an entire corporate strategy centered around sustainability as its core pillar, right? And you start seeing the pharma companies that I mentioned break these barriers of the Chinese firewall between what their CSR work is doing and what their core business is doing. Right? Where we start seeing companies like Merck make announcements of $500 million to invest in maternal health, but they're doing that because at the end of the day, if they do that, that will drive core business value, that they can access these markets in new and innovative ways. So then we go into I started talking about the third era, which is this integration of business and sustainability and CSR. And I think now we're in the fourth era, which is uncertainty, really. And I actually think there's a huge opportunity where we are today. I think you're gonna ask another question, so I'm not gonna get into it. But because of the current environment that we're all living in, certainly in the US, but in many other parts of the world as well. It's not just the US where we have this backlash on ESG, sustainability, CSR, everything that I find is my core value. It seems like is under attack. And the opportunity in it all is that at the end of the day, business has one metric.
I'm just going to just interrupt for 1 second. So we have the Honorable Minister who's joined us, but I just thought, I'll just interrupt and just welcome him. Yes, so that is it, but he's just joined us, but please continue.
Oh, that's a good cue to wrap up because I've probably been talking too long. Business has one metric, it's profit. And so if we can measure the impact of our CSR, our sustainability efforts in terms of how it drives business value, long-term and short-term, now there is more of an imperative than ever to invest in the tools and the mechanics to do that and do that properly. And at the end of the day, if I can convince my investors that investing in sustainability initiatives, investing in the CSR initiatives that I'm doing to empower women in my garment supply chains, if I'm a company like Gap, that's going to drive business value and it's going to drive share price. I'm seeing more and more companies using the data they have not to manage compliance, but to drive business case.
Thanks, Prat. So you're talking a lot about sustainability, not just as a strategic goal, but as a way of operating. So Karen, this has been a lot of your career has been as an operator. How do you think about this topic in terms of the current moment?
Yeah, first of all, I think your framework is a great visual framework to think about the evolution of what's happened. I'm super optimistic that when you cut through all of the noise that's out there right now on the traditional kind of way people talk about ESG and CSR, there's a lot of progress that's being made. The great companies are staying the course. They're scrubbing their websites, they're taking out all the lightning rod words and all of that so they don't get caught up in some of the social quagmires that are going on. But there's a lot of innovation and everything that is happening. It's happening, so two of the boards that I sit on are very much in the industrial kind of engine and HVAC space. Despite attempts by governments around the world to drive kind of incentives and things like that, to your point, the economics don't work. But the progress is still being made on putting engines in the market that are much more efficient, much more friendly to the environment, and it's tied to the company's purpose and culture. And I think where companies can get sideways is when they don't tie it to their inherent purpose and culture, their values and their principles. And great companies like the Unilevers, the Cummins, the Dells, people like that are continuing to invest and continuing to do some really good work.
Thanks, Karen. Sanjeev, you do a lot of work with communities and executives all over the world and also have your own career in sustainability and this type of work. What are your thoughts, of course, in the US context where we are, but also internationally?
Thank you, Geetha. I'm delighted to be here with my fellow panelists, and thanks to Win as well, Stuti and team. Adam Smith is supposed to have said that the invisible hand of capitalism will always move in the right direction. He didn't quite say that, but he's purported to have said that. And Milton Friedman said the business of business is business. But in some ways, perhaps they were not entirely correct. And let me explain a little bit about what I mean when I say that. My fellow panelists have already talked about this and alluded to it and given a few examples as well. But let me reinforce that with a few more examples. So Patagonia, for example, is a company that obviously is interested in its bottom line, like all companies are, but they actively encourage their customers to repair instead of purchase, right? You keep your carbon footprint lower, you keep less micropollutants from entering the water and the ecosystem when you buy less, right? So that's one example. Starbucks has ethical farm sourcing that they've made a pillar of their work. Now, in giving you some of these examples, Microsoft has pledged to be carbon negative by 2030. In giving you some of these examples, and there are so many others, I'm not intending to suggest that everything that all of these companies do even within sustainability is perfectly all right and perfectly great. That's not the point I'm making. I know there is nuance associated with this topic. But the point I'm making is that, as I think Karen was just saying, that if you don't use the word ESG, yes, there is an impact of the current political climate in the United States, but also around the world, on companies being forced to not just scrub their websites, you're correct in saying that, but also perhaps undertake maybe some fewer activities than they otherwise might have done in that space. But that is not to say that no good work is being done. There is good work being done by a variety of different companies in a variety of different sectors in the sustainability area. Just don't call it ESG.
Thank you for that. So if we kind of move into the practical realm, I was actually just at a few events yesterday where one of the topics of conversation were just the eroding trust in institutions, in the social sector and government institutions, et cetera. And so businesses have to figure out ways of establishing that trust alongside the work that they're doing. So in the practical realm, what is maybe one step from your perspective that companies can take to elevate people and planet outcomes alongside financial performance? And if you have thoughts on what role trust and provenance play in that, if you could share that with the group. Let's start with whoever would like to go first.
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, I read that Edelman report that comes out and what's happening around trust and all of that, and the significant role that corporations and everything are playing. I think it gets back to, you got to pick a couple of key areas that your customers care about, that you can unlock value, and are going to give employees a reason to show up in the morning to go to work other than just collecting a paycheck. And I was fortunate when I was at Dell that the places that we picked to invest in were women entrepreneurs, which is what brought a few of us here together. We invested in applying technology to the whole genome sequencing area to help to really make progress around neuroblastoma and other areas of cancer treatment, which 10 years or so ago, you never even heard people talk about, hey, you've been diagnosed with cancer, I can sequence your genome. Now it's a very common thing, given kind of the role that technology has played. So I would say pick a couple of key areas, ones that your customers value, and they can be storytellers for you, and ones that give employees hope, and a way to get involved in a lot of these initiatives that you do across the company.
Thanks, Karen. Prat, Sanjeev, anything to add?
I would add two things. One is authenticity, and the second is partnership. So authenticity being customers are smart, consumers are smart. They know when you're purpose washing, when you're greenwashing. So being out there with authentic messaging. I don't know if anyone saw, it's obviously a very politically charged topic, but the American Eagle versus the Gap response. It was, again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, do a Google search on American Eagle advertisement and Gap advertising, and you can make your own decision on your perceptions on both brands based on that. But that it was two very different approaches to consumer engagement, and some would argue they're both authentic, some might not. The second is partnership. So companies are not experts in doing the right thing, but organizations like yours are. There are civil society organizations, there's academia, there's government that know what citizens are demanding and what they need, right? And are co-creating solutions with citizens. So working in partnership with those actors on the ground, I think also creates that trust.
Thanks, Prat. Sanjeev?
I agree with what Karen and Brad have said, and I think what I'm about to say will relate to that, but perhaps build upon it a little bit more. My fundamental point is that populism and stakeholder capitalism can work both ways. And sometimes profits can align with that too. Take some examples. Recently, we have this kerfuffle about ABC and Disney and Jimmy Kimmel, right? He's been reinstated. And business profitability had something to do with that decision. One can, depending on your point of view, you can argue if that was the right or the wrong decision. But either way, business profitability had something to do with that decision. Data centers. You know, a lot of tech companies, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room is aware, is building data centers in America, is building data centers in India and in various other countries. And that is an extremely profitable opportunity, a business necessity, in fact. Now, the point is that the smart companies that are doing good work on sustainability are sourcing the energy for the data centers to the extent possible via renewable energy, right? Then recyclable packaging. I know that was one of the topics that was discussed, Stuti, in your preamble to this panel. Coca-Cola is moving more and more towards recyclable packaging of drinks and away from plastics, right? So just 2 points in closing. Number one, companies should, I think, pay proactive attention, not just reactive attention, to stakeholder messaging. That doesn't mean that you can always implement what every stakeholder says. You may not even always agree, but proactively seek it out. That's one. Second, the localization of supply chains that is being forced upon various companies by the political climate actually often has a salutary, beneficial impact on sustainability, because local supply chains are often more sustainable in the environment than our distant supply chains.
Thanks, Sanjeev. We were just talking in the lobby when we were coming up, Sanjeev and I, about sometimes you see a big transformational change and it feels like it happened just at that moment, but it's in fact the function of years of incremental work that's been happening. So my next question is really around that long-term value of sustainability and how you can think about that value as a company alongside something that's in your face all the time, like quarterly reports. And how have you all thought about that in your careers, and what would your advice be to companies as they think about that long-term value?
You know, thanks for that. That's a good question, Geetha, and I know that in our framing of this panel, you had brought this up, which I think is an important point that needs to be discussed. The recent rule by the Securities and Exchange Commission that has been released under the Trump administration moves away from quarterly reporting and moves more into a longer-term reporting format by companies, suggesting that companies in China do take care of the long-term corporate investment that's necessary. But here in America, that's the suggestion, here in America, that quarterly reporting distracts companies from long-term investments, including in sustainability, which, by the way, for reasons that this panel has already discussed, sustainability is actually often married to positive long-term financial results. But anyway, that's the argument, right? Now, a couple of points on that. Number one, the business literature does not show that there is a dichotomy between quarterly reporting and long-term investments. It is arguably a problem that business experts have discussed, but the business literature does not show the evidence that quarterly reporting precludes long-term investing, right? That's point number one. Point number two, innovation, which is good in the short term and the long term. In the short term, because it shows the market and signals to the market that you are building something new and you are disrupting, like our honorable minister. And in the longer term, a good thing, because it shows that you are building promise and value for the long term. So it's good in both ways. Innovation by the corporate sector is actually key in sustainability, environmental sustainability. I'll give you just one example. Ørsted, which is a Norwegian utility and an energy company, used to be one of the largest companies in Europe in the coal mining sector, right? But now, as far as wind energy is concerned, they're one of the largest, not just European, but global players in the wind energy sector. And they've transformed their business over time purely by way of innovation.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would just add maybe two other points. By the way, there is a lot of resources that go into generating 8Qs and 10Ks on a quarterly basis. So I'm a huge proponent of moving off of the quarterly Wall Street kind of time suck that happens when it comes to earnings report. Anyhow, that's not what the purpose of this is. I think from a transformation perspective, it's really, really important to just keep your eye on the North Star and what are the real problems that your customers are trying to solve and how do you help them solve it. You talked about the whole data center piece. So when I was at Dell, you know, we were like, you can sell a lot of servers, you can sell a lot of storage to customers, but what is the problem they're really trying to solve? It was access to energy, power. So that translated into, well, how do you build data center infrastructure that can really help to solve what is the real customer problem? I sit on the Cummins board. Cummins has a significant presence in the medium duty, heavy duty markets around the world. India is an incredibly important market for Cummins. We just announced a $2 billion joint venture in battery electric, medium duty, heavy duty engines. Because we see where the market is going, you see the efficiencies that are happening, but more importantly, when you talk to customers, the single biggest issue that you have right now is access to truck drivers. You can't get them. People don't want to be truck drivers. So you start to think about autonomous driving and how do you build, you know, real products and put products in the market that is solving that problem, not just, well, I need to go chase batteries because everybody's chasing batteries. So I do think that longer term customer value, customer problem solving piece is a great way to think about how do you connect all those pieces.
Thanks,
Geetha?
Karen. Prat, final word.
I guess very quickly, the data doesn't lie, right? If you look at the companies that prioritize purpose, that prioritize sustainability, they outperform the market. If you look at the Russell 1000 index, Just Capital released a study recently where they did that analysis and they showed that companies that invested in women's empowerment, that invested in sustainability and DEI, et cetera, were consistently outperforming. Unilever under Paul Pullman's tenure significantly outperformed CPG, or every CPG company out there. Right? Is that causality, correlation? I don't know, but that was the only company out there that had a corporate strategy focused exclusively on not exclusively, but primarily on sustainability.
Thank you all so much. I think we're at time. I hope you all appreciated the conversation on sustainability, and really, I think our panelists brought to life that it's not just a slogan, but truly can be a part of culture that's thread through people, purpose, philanthropy, planet, and provenance. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it.